I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And welcome back, fam. I hope you had a really good weekend. We have quite a bit of stories to cover. Interesting things happened apparently over the weekend. I do want to make this announcement, and I'll make it again at the end of the show because I don't want to forget to give you the heads up. Thursday, it looks like I will be going live Thursday afternoon instead of Thursday evening. Max Blumenthal is supposed to be here. Eric's going to do a hard confirm tomorrow. So if that stays as planned, then look for me to be live Thursday afternoon, probably around 2 p.m. Eastern time. We'll probably do call in right after that show. We'll do it via Zoom. And then I do have a poll for you guys. I guess I'll do it later in the show. I want to poll you and ask you, which platform you prefer in reference to doing these call-in type shows via Zoom, Twitter, etc. But I can do that at the end of the show. So Eric, don't let me forget about that. But welcome back, guys. I do want to start out by shouting out people in the chat. What is up? Nick A says, Kelly is a dunce bimbo. Okay. Strong words from Nick. Shout out to Miguel, says peace. Greetings, Lorez says, sup, Sab, Eric, Corey, and Sab fam. Wish the Glenn Megyn talk was on Fox. I'm reading Listen Liberal by Thomas Frank. It was Carter, not Reagan, who began neo-lib tax cuts. Dems completely sold out after JFK. It's a good point. Shout out to Tim, though, about Gaza. I'm so sick of these non-existent celebrities. Where the F are any of these people claim to be for humanity and decency? No one has said a word other than Angelina Jolie. She's a real one. You know what's interesting? DJ Khaled, DJ Khaled, that guy, completely silent. He's Palestinian. No word from DJ Khaled. But I totally hear you. Shout out to David Sabby. We are in World War III. I hear you, David. I hear you. Greetings, Mastermind says, is it ironic that in the Jackson family, it was Jermaine that was least Jermaine? Mastermind coming in with the jokes. Oh dear. Is that a dad joke? That's a dad joke. Shout out to Terrell says, Sabby Sabs, the U.S. not helping Israel against Iran, ? We know America lies. Listen, notice how the media is saying Iran counterattack, meaning Israel started it. Interesting. Shout out to Metal Music says, sup, peep. Greetings, NY Varsity says, listening to Sabby on the road, escaping Reno. Let's go. Oh, I have never been to Reno. It's a little place, right? Little Reno. Shout out to Jesus says, I'm just here to take a whiff of Megyn Kelly releasing farts. What the? You guys got mad jokes already, man. You're already joking around in the chat. Shout out to Hannah says, I hope Glenn schooled Megyn. Interesting. Shout out to Ilhanner, giving a shout out to Miguel. Greetings, Red says, hey, Sabby, happy Tuesday. It's Taco Tuesday, fam. Shout out to Randy says, good evening, Sabby comrades. Shout out to Dwayne giving a what's up hi to Miguel. Miguel, you're popular. Greetings, Rick says, hey, y'all. Shout out to, make sure I don't skip over this one. Mark says, Sabby. Greetings, CM says, hit like early, please. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and smash the like. Thank you very much. Shout out to Retro Gamer says, hello. Shout out to a gamer. That's right. You're always on yeah, you're changing your profile picture often now. I noticed that. Interesting. Shout out to Sean says, I think cool music. Yeah, cool music. Thank you so much. I know I love that beat, right? Shout out to Richard says, it is time. Greetings, Eric T. Red says, the time is nigh. The time is nigh. Interesting. I don't know about that one, but shout out to Katie's K7 says, do this in the morning, Sabby Sabs in the evening. Shout out to Royal says, B1, been waiting for you to cover Medhurst. Yeah, I've been getting that request from a lot of people. And then I did see the clip going around on Twitter of him on Fox News. So I do want to cover that. Shout out to Natalie says, had to put my wolf tank down today. Miss him awful. He was 14 plus. He was my hero. Oh, it sounds like you had to put your dog down. I'm so sorry to hear that, Natalie. So sorry to hear that. Shout out to Earl says, Mastermind Hour, waving hand on waving flag emoji. Flags how emojis should be. That's interesting. Greetings, Lou says, evening comrades. Shout out to Nikki's World says, hey, everyone. Greetings, Ravina says, hello to Dwayne, Rick, Natalie, Mastermind. Says GTSI tonight. You guys know I'm not good with all these acronyms. I am not the best with those. Shout out to Jean says, oh, love the new fit. Shout out to New Sheep says, bye. And greetings, Thon says, yo, yo, yo. I had a friend like that in college. Used to say that to people like, yo, yo, yo. Greetings, Arcane says, doobie, doobie, doo. All right, let's go ahead and jump right in. And greetings to Cinderella says, doobie doobie doo. Shout out to Cinderella. Cinderella. All right, let's go ahead and give a shout out to Sabby patrons. They're out here doing the damn thing. Thank you so much for your support. Appreciate you. If you are interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories. Ultimate, Sabinators. There's also Sabsters. And we cannot forget about the Sabbies in the house, of course. And there are also members. Shout out to all of the peeps keeping the lights on around me. And I want to give a special shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Zanetta Valencia. What a pretty name. That is a beautiful name. Girl, you don't have to worry about anybody else saying, I know so many people that have that name, right? So a lot of people have names like Chris, and how many Chris did you know? How many Marks did you know? That kind of thing. But Zanetta Valencia, that is a very pretty name. And Denise Marguerite Sesher, another pretty name. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's interesting. My mom is named Denise, and I've never met I've met one other Denise, and that was when I worked at MIT. But other than that, I've never met any other Denise. So it's interesting. I don't think people name their kids Denise nowadays. I think it's one of those names that might have been popular back in the 60s, 70s, maybe 80s. But I don't see people naming their kids Denise much anymore, But people are naming their kids Apple. Red 6 says, my sister and niece's middle name are Denise. Oh, interesting. Huh. All right. Let's go ahead and share that beautiful thumbnail. Folks, let's get into it. It's been a busy day today, guys. This is my 3rd show. I was on Rising this morning. Don't forget to check that out if you missed that. I'll send that out via Substack too. And I was actually on JB's show earlier this afternoon as well. So this is my 3rd show today. It has been a busy day. But tonight we are discussing, ladies and gentlemen, George Galloway grills Rishi Sunak. Oh, they finally have this head-to-head moment. And we got to talk about this. This is in reference to Israel, of course. George Galloway is the type of politician that I wish we did have in our Congress as well, not afraid to stand up to the prime minister. You really do need that type of, fire in there. We're also going to discuss Glenn Greenwald versus Megyn Kelly. Yes, this is going to be a very educational discussion because Glenn and Megyn, for the most part, are pretty cool, right? They're pretty cool. But again, I hopefully think that Megyn will walk away from this conversation having learned a thing or two. So we're going to get into that. We're also going to discuss Richie Medhurst on Fox News. I could not believe this. Richie Medhurst, another phenomenal commentator, covers geopolitics, has been covering that for years. A lot of you have reached out to me and said, please talk about Richie Medhurst or please try to get him on. I should reach out to him to get him on as well. So we're going to cover that. And last but not least, there was a SCOTUS ruling that will affect all of us. And I hope more people will to talk about this because we really have to fight for our rights here. And SCOTUS, I've said before, they need to have term limits, but we're going to discuss that breaking story about the SCOTUS ruling and how it could impact you. So let's go ahead and do the damn thing, kids. Start us off right by smashing that like button. That helps me out with the algo. And if you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And let's go ahead and dive right in, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get started with our first story. There were a number of protests that happened over the weekend, also yesterday as well, across the country in different cities in support of Palestinian self-determination, in support of a ceasefire, in support of just stopping these conflicts that are happening in the Middle East, just period, just stopping all of them. We're going to start with this clip here from San Francisco, and this is all in reference to the SCOTUS ruling. And I really think we really need to start having a serious conversation in this country about term limits on the Supreme Court. San Francisco protesters actually blocked the Golden Gate Bridge. Believe it or not, this did happen. They were out there doing the damn thing. You can see there's a banner here that they have saying, "Stop the world for Gaza." And this is exactly what they're doing. Obviously, there's a lot of traffic that goes across this bridge. So let's check out this clip here. So you can see it here in the siege on Gaza now. So you can see they have their cars here. Again, heavy traffic comes through this area. So very proud of the demonstrators there. Again, young people out there doing the damn thing. That's the Golden State Bridge, ladies and gentlemen. And you have to remember when people say protest peacefully, etc., you got to remember, this is still peacefully. They're not being violent. And when we talk about disrupting the flow of traffic, you have to remember during the civil rights movement, there was similar things where people were marching down these streets. Remember, marching across bridges. There was disruption. There were boycotts as well. There were sit-ins. So you have to remember that. This is why I don't like it when people say, don't protest that way. Don't do it like that. You're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. MJ moment. But there was also another event that took place in Los Angeles, and I want to bring this up as well. Shout out to Answer Coalition for this. Happening now, a huge crowd is marching on the Block Shopping Center in downtown LA as part of National Strike for Gaza. Now, I'm not, I've never been to LA. Some of you watching are in the LA area. I know you've made that known. So I don't know what the Block is, but some type of shopping area, apparently. Check this out. But perhaps the most fierce protest of them all was the protest that took place outside of Lockheed Martin. Now, shout out to Chuck Modi. I said Nobi. Chuck Modi for capturing this. You profit from genocide. Protesters shutting Lockheed Martin down just hours before the latest windfall. So I want to show you this as well. You'll see there's a security guard inside here, and protesters have linked arms outside of Lockheed Martin.
Lockheed, you can't hide! You profit from genocide! You profit from genocide! Lockheed, you can't hide! Lockheed, you can't hide! You profit from genocide! You profit from genocide! What does Lockheed stand for? Genocide and Lockheed.
Okay, so that's Chuck Modi there. And if I remember correctly, I'll go ahead and check because there's one thing I did forget to add here. I think Chuck included that officer in the inside saying he didn't know what to do. Let me see if I can find that one here. There was also Google as well. I'll show you this one as well. There were protests at Google, Sunnyvale and Google's NYC 10th floor commons, breaking dozens of Google workers lead historic coast to coast ends. So you'll see this here as well. It says Googlers against genocide. Google workers sit in against Project Nimbus, no tech for genocide.
Google, you can't hide.
Google, you can't hide.
We charge you with genocide.
We charge you with genocide.
No, Google, you can't hide.
No, Google, you can't hide.
You are funding genocide.
You are funding genocide.
Sundar, you can't hide.
Sundar, you can't hide.
We charge you with Google.
So Google as well. Again, these protests took place all over the country in different cities. And I was trying to find, let me just go to Chuck's media, because this is usually where you can find these things easier. Here's another one here. You can see this is one of the protesters outside of Lockheed Martin. So it looks like they're trying to make an arrest there, or at least uncuff her. Lockheed Martin here. You see this? Lockheed Martin profits from genocide and your tax dollars fund it. So it says Lockheed Martin is the largest weapons manufacturer in the U.S., receiving $48 billion in taxpayer money every year. The F-35 program alone will cost taxpayers over $1.7 trillion. Lockheed Martin supplies weapons to Israel, fueling the genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza. Not only is Lockheed Martin complicit in Israel's war crimes, it profits from them. So again, I think when you're protesting, one of the people, like, of course, Lockheed Martin, that is a big one. I was going to try to find to see if I could find it one more. Here it is right here.
Resistance is justified. Lockheed wants genocide. Resistance is justified. Lockheed genocide.
So that's the officer there inside of Lockheed Martin. I guess he's like, look, I don't know what to do, bruh.
Resistance is justified. Lockheed wants genocide. Resistance is justified.
And you see they have images there in the corruption. So again, the young people are very hip to what is going on. They know who is complicit in a lot of this. It's very telling. There's also Boeing here. I want to make sure I got the right one. There's also Boeing. Yeah, so it's really great. Like I said before, the young people, they're really on it. They know what's going on. I see your comment there as well. Bram says, this is wonderful to see. Yes, it is absolutely great to see. And I want to pivot back to the Lockheed Martin bit here for just a second. Lockheed Martin LMT was just awarded $17 billion missile defense contract. $17 billion. So no one's going to give you that type of contract if you're not going to actually use those weapons. You see how that works? Politician Kevin Hearn has been buying LMT in up to 15,000 increments regularly since 2019 via dividend payments and regular buys. His most recent was March 29th, unusual. You guys see that? His most recent was March 29th. So that's Kevin. And then they actually have a screenshot here, which you guys can't see all of this, but a screenshot of his LMT purchases there. Now, I show you all of this because the Supreme Court has actually just released a new ruling in reference to protest in this country. Now, we need to talk about the First Amendment and have a serious conversation about that, because this ruling from the Supreme Court is very troubling for those of us who have been active in the streets in reference to direct action. The Supreme Court effectively abolishes the right to mass protests in 3 U.S. states. It is no longer safe to organize a protest in Louisiana, Mississippi, or Texas. Now, let's continue on here. If you're watching and you live in one of those states, contact your representatives to push back against this. And again, this speaks to matters that I've said before about people who were complaining during the BLM protests, and they said, no, you got to end the protest. Some people were happy that people like Governor DeSantis was calling for protest restrictions, etc. People were happy about that because they didn't support the issue that people were protesting against at that point in time. But it was only a matter of time when there would be an issue that maybe you would support that this would affect. And this is what I was trying to warn people about back then. Let's get into this decision from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court announced on Monday that it will not hear McKesson v. Doe. The decision to not hear McKesson leaves in place a lower court decision that effectively eliminated the right to organize a mass protest in the states of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. Under the lower court decision, a protest organizer faces potentially ruinous financial consequences if a single attendee at a mass protest commits an illegal act. It is possible that this outcome will be temporary. The court did not embrace the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit's decision attacking the First Amendment right to protest, but it did not reverse it either. That means that at least for now, the Fifth Circuit's decision is the law in much of the American South. So just because this decision has been made in Louisiana, Texas, and Mississippi, that doesn't mean it will not spread to other states that are in the South. So just keep that in mind. So if you live in the South, pay attention to this. For the past several years, the Fifth Circuit has engaged in a crusade against DeRay McKesson, a prominent figure with BLM movement who organized a protest near a Baton Rouge police station in 2016. The facts of McKesson case are unfortunately quite tragic. McKesson helped organize the Baton Rouge protest following the fatal police shooting of Alton Sterling. During that protest, an unknown individual threw a rock or similar object at a police officer. The plaintiff in the McKesson case, who is identified only as Officer John Doe. Sadly, the officer was struck in the face and, according to one court, suffered injuries to his teeth, jaw, brain, and head. Everyone agrees that this rock was not thrown by McKesson. However, and the Supreme Court held in NAACP versus Claiborne Hardware, 1982, that protest leaders cannot be held liable for the violent actions of a protest participant, absent unusual circumstances that are not present in the McKesson case, such as if McKesson had authorized, directed, or ratified the decision to throw the rock. Indeed, as Justice Sonia points out in a brief opinion accompanying the court's decision to not hear McKesson, the court recently reaffirmed the strong First Amendment protections enjoyed by people like McKesson in Counterman versus Colorado of 2023. That decision held that the First Amendment precludes punishment for inciting violent action unless the speaker's words were intended, not just likely, to produce imminent disorder. The reason Claiborne protects protest organizers should be obvious. No one who organizes a mass event attended by thousands of people can possibly control the actions of all the attendees, regardless of whether the event is a political protest, a music contest, concert, or the Super Bowl. Let's talk about that for just a second. There have been a couple of incidents that have happened at music festivals in the United States where there have been violent actions that took place. The artists performing have never been found to have incited those acts. Did that stop those protests from happening, those concerts, those music contests from happening in this country? No, these concerts still happen. Coachella just happened recently, right? So we have to think about these things. There have also been violent events that have happened at music concerts that have been indoors. There have been violent events that have happened at sports games, professional and non-professional games. This right here is the Supreme Court sending a message to protesters and organizers in this country. And I find it very interesting considering the fact that we have mass protests happening all across the world for the Palestinian people. So I don't consider this to be a coincidence. Timing is very important. And that's something to think about. The examples that are given here, a music concert, the Super Bowl. Will the same rule be applied? I doubt not. I think this is to send a message. So if protest organizers can be sanctioned for illegal action of any protest attendee, no one in their right mind would ever organize a political protest again. And that's the point, folks. They want to put fear in organizers. They want to scare you out of trying to organize or protest again. Now, we have the First Amendment in this country. We have the right to assembly. We have the right to protest. We're supposed to have the right to have freedom of speech. But over the years, our government has found ways to tweak the First Amendment. And they've tweaked it in such a way that they can still say this is not in violation of your First Amendment rights. So I think we really need to sit down and take a hard look at what the First Amendment actually says. It goes on to say here, indeed, as Fifth Circuit Judge Don Willits, who dissented from his court McKesson decision, warned in one of his dissents, his court's decision would make protest organizers liable for the unlawful acts of counter-protesters and agitators. So under the Fifth Circuit's rule, a Klansman could sabotage a BLM movement simply by showing up at its protests and throwing stones. This could also happen at any of the Palestinian, pro-Palestinian protests, where someone who is a Zionist who supports the state of Israel could show up at these protests and cause some type of violence. And then next thing you know, the protesters, the organizers who actually organized that protest, they're held accountable for something that someone else did. This is a dangerous moment. The Fifth Circuit McKesson decision is obviously wrong. Like McKesson, Claiborne involved a racial justice protest that included some violent participants. In the mid-1960s, the NAACP launched a boycott of white merchants in Claiborne County, Mississippi. At least according to the state Supreme Court, some participants in this boycott engaged in acts of physical force and violence against the persons and property of certain customers and prospective customers of these white businesses. Indeed, one of the organizers of this boycott did far more to encourage it than McKesson is accused of in this case. Charles Edwards, a local NAACP leader, allegedly said in a speech to boycott supporters that if we catch any of you going in any of them racist stores, and he goes on to say, that act there, what he's going to do. But the Supreme Court held that this emotionally charged rhetoric did not transcend the bounds of protected speech. It ruled that courts must use extreme care before imposing liability on a political figure of any kind. And it held that a protest leader may only be held liable for a protest participant's actions in very limited circumstances. So, but here we are, folks. Here we are. And it says here, needless to say, the idea that the First Amendment recedes the moment as mass protest violates a traffic law is quite novel, and it is impossible to reconcile with pretty much the entire history of mass civil rights protests in the United States. So they are slowly but surely trying to remove the right to protest. And this is what I've been warning people about. I tried to warn you that this was about to come. They were leading this way. They were leading this way. Now we're going to try to see, I'm going to try to pull this up here. Let me pull this out. We're going to take a glimpse. Let's look at the First Amendment. And let's see, because petition and assembly. Let's pull this up for just a second. Because I feel like as time goes on, they are slowly trying to take these rights away from us. And what they're doing is they're implementing all these different measures they're chipping away at the First Amendment, and they're chipping away in such a way that they can say, well, no, this doesn't really violate your First Amendment rights. Now, let's look at petition and assembly. The petition clause protects the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. The right expanded over the years. It is no longer confined to demands for a redress of grievances in any accurate meaning of these words, but comprehends demands for an exercise by the government of its powers in furtherance of the interests and prosperity of the petitioners and of their views on politically contentious matters. The right to petition the government for a redress of grievances therefore includes the right to communicate with government officials, lobbying government officials, and petitioning the courts by filing lawsuits with a legal basis. The petition clause first came to prominence in the 1830s, and that was during the gag rule. Let's go forward a little bit more here. The right of assembly is the individual right of people to come together and collectively express, promote, pursue, and defend their collective or shared ideas. This right is equally important as those of free speech, free press, because as observed by the Supreme Court in DeJonge versus Oregon, the right to peacefully assembly is cognate to those of free speech and free press and is equally fundamental. These are all connected. So what have we seen over the years? When we look at Julian Assange, for example, people like Daniel Hale, Mumia, when we look at how they're going after free press, then you look and you see how they're going after free speech, right? Like, look at how the government has basically targeted executives that own these social media platforms, telling them who to suppress, who to remove, and what type of content they're allowed to have. Now, they've done this through different ways by telling you that, well, we're going to tell you what's misinformation and what's not. That's the word that they use, the misinformation, right? That's how they can say that they had every right to suppress someone or remove someone from that platform. Now you see the Supreme Court is going after protests. All three of these are connected. This is the government trying to find ways to stop you from fighting back through the freedom of press, speech, and protest. It goes on to say here, let me go down here. The right of peaceful assembly was originally distinguished from the right to petition in the United States versus Cruikshank. The first case in which the right to assembly was before the Supreme Court. So think about that as well. The court broadly declared the outlines of the right of an assembly and its connection to the right of petition. Now listen to this. The right of the people peacefully to assemble for the purpose of petitioning Congress for a redress of grievances or for anything else connected with the powers or duties of the national government is an attribute of national citizenship, and as such, under protection of and guaranteed by the United States. The very idea of a government, Republican in form, implies a right on the part of its citizens to meet peacefully for consultation in respect to public affairs and petition for a redress of grievances. So this is really, and you can look at all of these, freedom of association, but you don't really have, if you think about this, freedom of association, aren't people targeted because they're associated with certain people? Haven't people been targeted because they claim to be associated with Russia or China? They've been targeted by government agencies because of that. We really need to sit down one day and go through all of these. And we talk about freedom of speech. We actually had a bill. They were trying to pass a bill in the House to tell you that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. We have our government trying to tell people what they can and cannot say on social media platforms, but also in the classroom, on college campuses. So these are very dangerous times. And that's when I say we are going back to McCarthyism in this country. This is what I'm referring to. And now you see the Supreme Court has effectively abolished the right to mass protest in 3 states, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. One day we're going to sit down and I'm going to go through all of those. We're really going to break those down. Maybe I should create like a slideshow or something, but we're really going to break those down because this is a very concerning time. Very concerning. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you are a Democrat or Republican. This is an issue that affects all of us. JB says, hello, everyone. Thanks to Sabby for coming on today and having a wonderful conversation with me on my channel. Sabs, you're a class act. Love JB. Thanks so much. And shout out to JB. He had me on his show earlier today. Thank you, Perry, for the super chat. Sabby, the police are brutalizing protesters, and NYC should have Needin Kiswani from With Our Lifetime on to discuss the situation. I'll have to look into, Nerdine. I'll have to look into that. Thank you. Thank you, NY Varsity. SCOTUS was a quick get together to call corporations free speech. That case they heard right away, but have a problem calling free speech free speech. Yeah. Thank you, Andre. Would love for you to debate Olay over voting for Biden. Black people are definitely split. I don't think there's anything really to debate about. Like, just, some people are going to support the Democratic Party regardless. But I don't think there's anything to debate about, to be honest. I don't do that whole debate me bro culture. But yeah, buddy. Yeah. So we're in for wild times, you guys. And if you live in Louisiana, Mississippi, or Texas, I am sorry for you. My advice to you is to contact your representatives and get them to push back on this, because this is ridiculous. Doesn't matter if you support the Palestinian movement or not. It could be an issue that you do support that you are now no longer to participate in reference to protests because of it. I'll take the comment on Rockfin. Thank you. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, JVB. Unless the people start to respect and defend the Constitution for real, it's just a piece of paper. That's a good point there, JVB. Very good truth. Jamie says, am I a human being? I'm not a corporation. Yeah. Fatima says discussions are better than debates. I agree. Like, I really don't like the whole debate me bro culture. Like, that's not my jam. And I was on the debate team in high school. I was on the debate team, but that is not my jam. Okay, we are moving on to our next story. I don't know if you guys saw this, but I was very shocked to see that Fox News actually had Richie Medhurst on to talk about Israel and Gaza. I couldn't believe it. Like, I thought to myself, like, do you know who you're about to talk to? Someone who is independent media. Richie has been covering geopolitics for a long time, and it was shocking to me that they actually brought Richie Medhurst onto Fox News. I'm like, what? Yeah, I don't know if will CNN do that? MSNBC, will you bring Richie Medhurst on? Maybe things are starting to change. I don't know, but I thought it's pretty awesome that they brought on independent journalists to talk about this, especially someone to talk about it that is not pro-Israel. So let's go ahead and get started with this interview here with Richie Medhurst.
Yes. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time here today. First off, we were expecting an attack. We didn't know exactly when it would come. We didn't know exactly what it would look like. Very well could be that we're just seeing the very beginnings of an attack right now. What's your analysis of what we've seen and heard so far?
Well, many people doubted the Iranians because if we look back at the Qasem Soleimani assassination, they said that the Iranian response was lackluster, that they had just hit the Ain al-Assad base in Iraq and it was just for show. And so many people thought this was also going to be just for show. And it turns out it's not. So it's no wonder that they've named this operation Sincere Promise. So they are in fact delivering on it. My analysis was that even if Iran don't do a thing, they don't lift a finger, they're still strong arming Israel in the sense that their economy is in ruins, the international image is in ruins. And so now to have this direct response, it's both grand and great in size and also symbolically. You know, we have to say that this attack on the Iranian embassy in Damascus is something that's never happened before. We know that the United States bombed the Chinese embassy in the 90s, but at least they apologized afterwards. At least there was a semblance of guilt and regret. But in this case, it's just straight up, dropping 6 missiles from an F-35 in the middle of the day. And it's an outrageous violation of the Vienna Convention. You know, if someone had bombed a U.S. embassy in this manner, and I'm not saying someone, but another state had done that to a U.S. embassy or an Israeli embassy, I think they would not just launch 150 drones, but they would be launching nukes, perhaps. Who knows? So I think that the response is it was needed for Iran to show that it's not going to tolerate these kinds of actions. And it's needed for the whole world to understand that you cannot just bomb a consulate and expect no response. And unfortunately,
I want to pause here for a second because Iran basically said, mess around and find out, right? Like Iran was like, try me if you want to. Like, it's just, so yeah, Chris Hedges was on recently. We were talking about this, and this was basically Iran's way of sending a message, letting them know that we can if we want to. Right. So and they gave the warning beforehand. It's not like it came out of the blue. They did give the warning and let them know that they were going to respond. And so here we are.
We're headed down this road because the United Nations, the World Court, they should be doing their jobs. They should be punishing Israel for this through the mechanisms that were set up after World War II. But unfortunately, nothing has happened. We didn't even have condemnation. Our government in England said absolutely nothing about this embassy bombing. But I'm sure that they'll be upset about Iran launching the drones tonight. So there's a lot of hypocrisy going on. And I don't think people understand how scandalous it is on an international scale to kill 12 diplomats inside of a consulate, and on top of that, in a third country.
Let me pause there for just a second, because another thing I wanted to mention: where is the ICJ? I don't know about you guys, but they seem to be pretty quiet. The last news I heard is that Nicaragua was actually taking Germany in front of the ICJ. But the ICJ, the last time I heard from them in reference to Israel was that, they said that Israel has to submit a report within 30 days to give them an update. And they said, obviously, they have to do everything that they can to prevent genocide of the Palestinian people. But other than that, I haven't heard. And this was my concern back then. Remember when I said they didn't call for a ceasefire? And people told me, well, no, Sabby, it's because, and the way they did it was the right way. And I understood that too. But the problem that I had was that there was no enforcement. It's just like they made this statement. And then from there, it was just like, okay, well, the UN Security Council would fall in line, but that didn't happen, right? Because the US made sure to stop that, right? So I think that these are these questions that we have to ask ourselves. All of a sudden, the ICJ is very quiet and nowhere to be found.
Make of the fact that, and again, I'll reiterate, we were expecting some sort of movement on this front, and now we're getting our first look at what this is actually looking like from Iran's perspective. What do you make of the fact that this is coming from Iran proper and not from a proxy?
Well, it has a lot of meaning, of course. It carries a lot of weight because we've never seen something like this before. I would dispute the term proxy because proxy would mean that you are taking orders from Iran. The irony is that a lot of these groups that are called proxies, for example, the Houthis in Yemen, they had no connection to Iran when they were formed, but because of the West basically vilifying them, maligning them, they ended up being pushed towards Iran. It's kind of like Russia after the Ukraine war sanctions. We just pushed Russia into China's arms. So this is the same thing, and they're not proxies. They're just people who are fighting colonizers. We colonized Yemen, for example. It was a direct colony. There's a very bad historical connotation there. The Yemenis, they just don't want to be bombed by Britain anymore. They're just sick of that. And the only person in the neighborhood who's willing to help them is Iran. And so it's not that they take orders from Iran. But to answer your question, it carries significant weight. We should remember that the Iranians have been developing missiles, ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles for decades now, and they've gotten quite good at it, despite sanctions, I might add, which is rather extraordinary. And so to see.
And this is why we've been saying for all along, like, you do not want to have a conflict with Iran. The United States government should not want to have any type of war or conflict with Iran because they have been developing those weapons. And the reality is, like, it would not be good for any of us. And it's interesting what he said about the Houthis, for example, that they basically found an unlikely ally with Iran. It's not like they were aligned with them all along. But if you think about these things, sometimes when you are pushed to the brink, let's say by the same villain, we are the bad guys. When you're pushed to the brink by the same villain, which tends to be the United States government or other powers in the West, but is usually led by us, sometimes there can be allyship among countries that may have been unlikely allies, because you can find that type of allyship in the fact that both of you feel like you're being targeted by the West.
These drones now being used in such a manner, I mean, we know that at least 150 have been fired, and now we have a third wave coming. It's confirmed by everybody, by the US, by Israel, by the Iranians. This is never seen before. And it's not just Iran. We should also point that out, because they're doing this in multiple waves. So the first wave was from Iran, but the second wave, we're seeing drones being fired from areas like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. And so the idea is to try and overwhelm the Israeli defense system, the Iron Dome, and their electronic warfare radar and surveillance. And so we have that, and then there's going to be a third wave with ballistic missiles. And as you pointed out, this is going to take hours until we actually see the damage. And I think that there's going to be a lot of damage. And the fact it came from Iran directly, it, like I said, it carries a lot of weight, but you can't really blame them because they're just responding to the Israeli attack.
Basically, long story short, like, Israel likes to throw, stones, but then they want to hide their hand. And it's not just in reference to Iran. Like, we have to ask ourselves, who has been the aggressor? Israel has been the aggressor. When it comes to the Palestinian people, when it comes to Gaza, when it comes to the West Bank, again, who has been the aggressor? When it comes to Lebanon and Syria, who has been the aggressor? It has been Israel. So Israel is like that kid on the playground that likes to throw a punch and run away. Like when you were like in elementary school, there was that one kid that would like punch someone or trip someone, but they would run away. They wouldn't stand there for the fight. That's what Israel reminds me of. They want to do these things, but then when you choose to respond, you're the enemy, you're the villain, you're the bad person. And this is a really touchy time, I think, for some of us who know people that come from these countries. So like, for example, like I know people that are from Iran. I know people that are from Israel. I know people that are from the West Bank. Like I know people that are involved in some way, shape, or form. And when it comes to Iran, I've had friends on different sides. Like some people that I know they're really, really angry with the Iranian regime. They're really upset with it. They do not support the fact that Iran has basically been helping Hamas. There's some people I know that feel that way. There's some I know that they're upset with the regime in Iran because of what has happened to women. We were talking about this a year ago on RBN. The woman that was stoned in Iran because she didn't have on a hijab. Remember we covered that story? There are some people I know that are upset about that. But if you mention to them about, what's happening to the Palestinian people, Gaza and Hamas, like they don't have an opinion on that, but they have issues with the new regime. And then there are some people just like, yeah, I don't really care. I can't even go visit that country. Mo was on this show last year and I asked him and a couple other people, can you return to Iran? Because some of them still have family members there. And every single one of them told me no. So there's different opinions depending on who you talk to. What I've noticed, though, is that mainstream media is only bringing on Iranians that are heavily against what Iran is doing. They are against Iran helping Hamas. They're against Iran responding to Israel. So pay attention to that because I've noticed that with mainstream media.
What are you going to be watching for in the coming hours? What questions do you need answered in the next few hours as we anticipate that this artillery will eventually make its way toward Israeli airspace? We've also seen that the Jordanian officials are saying that they will shoot anything out of the sky that enters their airspace as well. So what are the threads that you're going to be watching as these things continue to move across the sky?
So I want to see how the international community respond. I want to see how my government responds in the UN Security Council. I want to see what is going to happen because it's a bit difficult now to say Iran did something bad, but we didn't say anything when the embassy was bombed. So that's number one. Number two, I want to see what weapons are being used because what Israel has been trying to do is to provoke Iran and Hezbollah specifically into revealing what weapons they have. And we don't know that ultimately what their entire arsenal consists of.
And they want to provoke Iran, and then they want the United States government to come in and help them fight their war. That's really what they want to happen. And then maybe they can take over that region too. You see how this works? So, and I'm sorry. And I said this before, if you're in the military and you can get out, get out. If you are in the military and you can get out, get out. This is crazy. You do not need to risk your life, put yourself at danger because of this. And you don't need to go over there fighting and trying to, kill people over there as well. You really don't need to just get out. Get out. Some people, they don't like when we say that. My dad was former military, and I've talked about that on the show before. I don't care. I've said it before. If you're in the military right now, get out. Run. Take the money and run. Real quick. In the words of Steve Miller Band, take the money and run.
So we know, for example, they have the Hajj Qasim missile. That can reach up to 1,400 kilometers. They've got the Fatah 1 and Fatah 2. I want to see which ballistic missiles they're going to use and also which drones, because in Ukraine, we underestimated the Russians. We thought that we're going to bowl them over with NATO. And in the end, they actually defeated Ukraine using Iranian drones, the Shahed 131 and 136. So I want to see if those are being used today. So again, the response from the international community, the kinds of weapons being used, are we going to see any new weapons revealed by Iran in this specific occasion? And obviously, these are questions that won't be answered for several days, I might add.
So when we talk about the initial attack in Damascus and this being a response to that attack, you say that there are questions to be answered about how, and Israel, I should say, never officially took responsibility for that attack, but so many of our analysts have told us that there really wouldn't be too many other people that are capable of doing such an attack. So if there could be an argument that reparations are to be made for that attack, could there be an argument to be made that reparations should be made about whatever is taking place from Iran's angle this time around?
Oh, look at the word that they just mentioned, reparations. You see, guys, What'd I tell you? Colin mentioned this, and Colin said that reparations will be a conversation for the future for the Palestinian people.
Well, there's an action and then there's a reaction. You're absolutely correct that only the Israelis could have done this, because we have to look at who has the capability to do this, who has the weapons, who wants to do this, and who can get away with it. And the Israelis fit the bill. And I should add that they bombed the Iranian embassy in Damascus, in Syria's capital. The Israelis have bombed Syria. Actually, they bomb it every 2 weeks, and they never acknowledge those strikes either. But it's obvious that it's the Israelis because, they're coming from the Golan Heights. They're registered on the radar. And like we pointed out, nobody else has the motive nor the capability to do that. So,
and Lebanon. They've been attacking Lebanon as well.
I wouldn't be surprised if we're now in the thousands of airstrikes in Syria. We know the Israelis, some Israeli officials, retired ones, have admitted that, yes, Israel has been bombing Syria hundreds and hundreds of times. So we have confirmation from them. But the usual modus operandi is not to acknowledge the strike. So it completely fits the bill. On the contrary, it confirms even further that it was Israel, because Israel never comes out and announces a strike. In terms of reparations, I mean, no one has been killed thus far in this Iranian response. So that's number one. Whereas if you look at the Iranian embassy, we had 12 people killed, I believe. And so half of them were Iranian and half of them were Syrian. Not only that, not only the loss of human life, but the attack on a consulate, on an embassy. I mean, this is a sacred place. It's inviolable. And every country in the world has understood this since the Vienna Conventions of 1961 and 1963. You don't attack diplomats, you don't attack embassies. These are basic rules, and no one has ever done something like this. So it really is crossing a line. And I should add, it emboldened Ecuador just a few days later to attack the Mexican embassy. So you see, it's leading us down a very dangerous road. Again, I'll put to you, I submit to you that if someone bombed an American embassy, a country bombed an American embassy or an Israeli embassy, wouldn't they respond in the same way that Iran is responding, or even harsher?
What do you think the UN is watching tonight? What do you think they're most interested to see, how this unfolds?
Well, they'll come out and they'll make some statements, but they won't get anything done. That is unfortunately the true nature of the United Nations. You have a lot of good people who work there, and I'm biased when I say that because my parents were in UN peacekeeping. But the problem is that at the top of the UN, and the UN is enormous. I don't think people realize how huge it is as an organization. At the top, you have, people who make sure that it doesn't work. One problem, for example, is veto power. I mean, I'm against this. I don't think my country should have that. I don't think the Russians or the Chinese or, the United States or France should have that, because it's always been, a source of problems in the Security Council. So, but that's since the foundation of the UN. So if tonight somebody goes to the UN Security Council and says, we want to get a resolution passed against Iran, and you're in favor of that, well, Russia is going to veto it, China is going to veto it, and that's going to please some people, and it's going to upset others. And so now we're playing politics instead of sticking to, the issues of what is right and what is wrong.
Very interesting there. Now, I want to show you something else that Richie actually gave a warning about a while back. And I don't know if everybody saw this. He talked about what Israel's plan is. He said Israel and the U.S. want the giant amounts of gas in Gaza to create a rival to China's new Silk Road. Let's take a little look at this, because I just want to remind everybody, you have to remember what the ultimate goal was. Remember, I kept telling you, ethnic cleanse the land, but also it's a land grab, right? They want them gone. They want that land. Check this out.
I don't think people have any idea what's really happening in Gaza and why it is happening. A few weeks ago, right before this war in Gaza ignites, Netanyahu goes to the United Nations General Assembly and he holds up this map and declares his plan for a new Middle East. And people are going, what is this stupid line this guy's drawing with a red marker? What it is an economic corridor that stretches all the way from India to the United Arab Emirates, into Saudi Arabia, into Jordan, Israel, and then finally to the entire European continent. I mean, the United States at this point, seeing their influence starting to fade, seeing the relevance of the dollar recede after they stole $300 billion from Russia. You have all these spooks in Washington and Tel Aviv, running around desperately trying to counter BRICS and counter China's new Silk Road. And this is their answer. This is a rival to the new Silk Road. Remember, the ancient Silk Road is the largest, most important trade route in human history. This thing is enormous. It stretches all the way from China to Syria to the Mediterranean Sea. The Chinese know how important this thing is and they want to revive it. It is the future of world economics, trade, and politics.
I noticed something. I noticed in this video, and most of his videos, he has on the keffiyeh, but I noticed in his interview on Fox News, he didn't have it on. Could have just been, timing. Maybe he just didn't have it available. But I wonder if that was a requirement from Fox News, or if he just felt it probably wasn't the best idea to wear. I don't know. But I did notice that. That's interesting.
Chinese know how important this thing is and they want to revive it. It is the future of world economics, trade, and politics. Within the span of a few weeks, Iran and Iraq have signed a railway deal. So now you have a rail link for the new Silk Road. And President Assad of Syria, who the West have been trying to isolate for over a decade, is now visiting China, the world's largest economy, and signing a strategic partnership. This is pivotal. So now the new Silk Road has rail access all the way to the Mediterranean Sea through Syria's port in Latakia. So not just land, but maritime trade. This is crucial. And as enormous and important as all of this is just one aspect. This is just one aspect. You still have the gas. How can we talk about the Middle East without talking about gas and oil?
We'll get to that in just a second. Oh, you said I didn't see him wearing it on recent podcasts. Oh, okay. Okay, gotcha. Maybe he lost it or something like that, but interesting. Let's talk about the gas and the oil.
When the US instigated the Maidan coup in 2014, that wasn't just about NATO expansion and encirclement of Russia. This was about surrounding, controlling, and cutting off Russian gas to Europe.
Just cut out here for just a second. I'm gonna let it go back. Okay, gas. There we go.
Control Ukraine, and you control the pipelines that feed and supply Russian gas to Europe. For decades, you've had US politicians, Republican and Democrat, from every administration, openly saying on camera, we don't want Nord Stream.
There will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
You want to have pipelines that don't go through Ukraine and Russia. For years, we've tried to get the Europeans to be interested in different pipeline routes. It's time to do that. You want to depend more on the North American energy platform, the tremendous bounty of oil and gas that we're finding in North America.
Lo and behold.
You know what that showed you? That showed you that both parties were a part of it. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party. This is what I'm trying to tell you guys. At the end of the day, they're not that different. They're not as different as you think they are. Some social issues, but other than that, they're not that different. You got Condoleezza Rice from the Republican Party. You got Joe Biden from the Democratic Party. Both saying the same thing when it comes to gas and oil.
Nord Stream 1 and 2 are blown up. I mean, this is without question the most egregious, the largest terrorist attack on European infrastructure in modern history. There are only 3 countries on this planet that can pull this off. They are Russia, Britain, and the United States. And let me tell you, it was not Russia. You combine that with the sanction packages from the European Union, banning Russian oil and gas. I mean, talk about shooting yourself in the foot. So now there's no more Russian gas coming into Europe. And just like that, the United States have achieved a long-standing foreign policy objective.
Yep.
Now, the only other country with enormous gas reserves, the second largest in the world, is Iran.
Here we go. So let's take a look at this list really quick. Top countries with natural gas reserves. Top 10. I can't see it on the thing. So look at this. Russia, Iran, Qatar, US, Saudi Arabia, Turkmenistan, the UAE, Venezuela, Nigeria, and China. So you see that?
Iran signed the nuclear deal in 2015 and 2016. They're complying in every way imaginable. The IAEA at the UN cannot be happier. And then the United States, you know, the guys who orchestrated the whole deal, go back on their word and they rip it up just like that and reimpose sanctions on Iran. So now Iran is barred from selling its oil and gas to Europe and others. So Russia and Iran, the two countries with the largest gas reserves, are out of the picture.
Yep.
Then Israel, all of a sudden, proposed themselves as a solution to the European Union's gas shortages.
So you see how that works? Let me go ahead and show that map there. See, all of a sudden, removing Russia and Iran from that category, all of a sudden now that may pave the way for Israel.
All of a sudden, proposed themselves as a solution to the European Union's gas shortages.
Take our trilateral energy, for example, that we closed in June with Egypt and Israel. It has played an important role in our strategy to get rid of the Russian fossil fuels.
How convenient. How convenient. In 2010, they conduct a geological survey and find this monstrous giant gas field in the Middle East. It's called the Leviathan, and it's in the Mediterranean Sea on the Levantine Basin. That means it's right off the coast of Palestine, Lebanon, Syria.
Right there. So you see that? Occupied Palestine, there's the West Bank. You see all this? There's Lebanon there.
Syria initially declines offers over its gas reserves and simultaneously refuses to lay pipes for a Qatari gas project. What a coincidence! Barely a year later, war breaks out in Syria. And who's funding it? Qatar and Israel and the United States are just some of the parties funding and running this war to overthrow the government in Damascus.
Damascus. And Israel attacks the Iranian embassy in Damascus. There it is, folks. There it is. All of this, it always leads back to money. Anytime there's any type of a conflict or war, geopolitical conflict, it always leads back to money and resources. Every time. Every time. So Richie really laid it out. I showed part of that before after October 7th. He really laid it out what the plan was there. And I think more people need to really understand that. That's why I kept telling people there are resources along the Gaza coast there. You know, you kick the people out. People say, well, they want to ethnically cleanse the land. Yes. And then do what with the land? And that's the piece that some people forget to mention. What do they want to do with the land? So that's important. And by the way, and people can take this however they want to, by the way, the US government is totally fine with that. The only reason the US government is even having these conversations with Netanyahu and telling him, okay, look, you need to calm down a bit. You know, Israel is losing support, as Biden has said, is because of the mass protests that have happened across the world. Because we have shown them that the world is not with you. The world does not agree with what Israel is doing. And particularly the Gen Z generation have been very well educated about the history of the creation of Israel. So they've been paying attention as well. That is the only reason that Biden has been having that conversation with Bibi in the first place. Had there been no protests, and I mean mass protests across the world, this conversation wouldn't even happen. And I want people to get it. This conversation wouldn't even happen. Our government is totally fine. They were totally fine with Israel doing what they were doing to the Palestinian people for decades. For decades. Disobeying international law. They were totally fine with it. They continued to give Israel money every year. They didn't care that they were kicking Palestinian people out their homes. That's why so many of these politicians are in bed with the Israeli lobby. They were totally fine. It was you. It was us. It was those of us out in the streets raising our voices to be heard. We are the ones that let them know that we don't agree with it. Joe Biden, regardless if it's Biden, if it's Trump, whoever is president at that point in time, at the end of the day, they all agreed with Israel. That includes Obama, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, George W. Bush. They all did. Sebastian said, when Fox News brings in more indie media than MSNBC and CNN combined. Arcane says, Fox is throwing in a kernel of truth on a mountain of lies for once, right? Patrick says, I love Gen Z because they accept truth that has been hidden. JB says they create the crisis and then slide in as the solution. Exactly. And they'll blame other countries for the crisis. It wasn't us. It's never us. It's Russia. It was China's fault. Everyone but us. Interesting. All right. We are moving on to the next story. Should be pretty interesting here. So you guys do know that George Galloway, he did win his race and he's already using his voice in the UK Parliament. He is already clapping back, I guess, at Rishi Sunak, who's the Prime Minister of the UK. And he was very loud and vocal about this in front of everyone. And I wish we had this type of representative here in our Congress in the United States. But I want to show you this. This is in reference to Rishi Sunak's pro-Israeli bias on the conflict with Iran. So this is really interesting. George Galloway stands up and basically hands Richie's ass to him, to be honest. And this happens multiple times throughout this discussion. Let's go into this clip here. And then we are going to bring up part of this conversation that George Galloway actually recently had with Scott Ritter that also ties into this as well. You have to remember, again, Rishi Sunak, a corporate shill, friends of Obama, apparently. Remember, Obama came and paid him a visit. Remember this? This happened recently. So he's who the corporate, elite, they actually want in power. He's also pretty wealthy himself. The military industrial complex backs this guy as well. That's who they want there. So when George Galloway won, and he won through the Workers' Party, Rishi Sunak came out publicly and spoke against it, because that was a realization for Rishi, that your time's probably about to be up, son. You're probably not going to win your re-election if George Galloway just won, because the people have spoken. So let's go ahead and get into this here.
There was not one single word in the Prime Minister's statement of condemnation of the Israeli destruction of the Iranian consulate in Damascus.
Well, we've called for restraint before. We called for restraint with regard to the attack on Gaza, yet the indiscriminate bombing took place. We called for restraint on the settlements in the West Bank, and yet the settlements have expanded. We called for a restraint so that food could be gotten to the children of Gaza, and yet malnutrition is killing some of them. So what action will the government take if Israel does not show restraint?
Suella Bratham.
Mr. Speaker, and please accept my condolences on the loss of your father.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, Mr. Speaker, I was in Israel at the northern border with Lebanon. And of course, we've all seen what happened this weekend. But since October the 7th, Iran-backed Hezbollah has fired over 4,000 rockets into northern Israel, displacing over 150,000 Israeli civilians.
Notice that she said she was in Israel, she wasn't in Gaza.
I met some of those families. They're under siege, they've been uprooted, but they are brave and defiant in the face of terrorism and anti-Semitism. Mr. Speaker, we have known for years that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps is the world's chief sponsor of terrorism.
Hear, hear.
Funding and promoting terrorist plots, radicalization and hostage-taking, both in the Middle East and at home. Mr. Speaker, we have proscribed Hamas. We have proscribed Hezbollah. Prime Minister, why don't we put the UK's national security first by now prescribing the IRGC?
Mr. Speaker, as the Honourable Lady knows, that we don't comment on any potential prescription decisions, but of course we recognise the threat from Iran and have taken measures to counter it at home and around the world. I obviously refer her to my previous answer, but I'm confident the police, security services and courts all have the tools that they need to sanction, prosecute and mitigate the threats from Iran. We've strengthened.
Someone said in the chat, it might have been Eric, someone said, is this the UK's AOC?
Our sanctions regime recently, and including sanctioning the IRGC in its entirety.
Rushanara Ali.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite the calls for a ceasefire here in our Parliament and across the international community, the war in Gaza has raged, costing 33,000 lives, as well as the 1,200 killed by Hamas attacks, and a humanitarian catastrophe that is now turning to a famine. For months, many have raised the spectre of the concern around regional escalation. Can the Prime Minister say more about precisely what conversations he's having with the leading figures in the Israeli government, as well as through various parties, to influence the Iranian regime to de-escalate as quickly as possible, given the seriousness of the crisis?
So what's interesting to me about these meetings or at least I found interesting, is that notice how they have to face each other. It's like you have to look each other in the face. So you have a group on one side and a group on the other side. It's really interesting to me. Could you imagine, like, if our Congress was actually set up that way, where the Republicans were on one side and the Democrats were on one side, and they had to face each other, look at each other in the face the whole time?
Well, both the Defence Secretary and Foreign Secretary have spoken to their counterparts over the weekend, including the Foreign Secretary has spoken to the Iranian Foreign Minister specifically to urge de-escalation and condemn what happened over the weekend. I'm speaking to Prime Minister Netanyahu shortly, and I can reassure her and all members of the House that we will continue, together with our allies, to urge calm heads to prevail and de-escalation. We think that's the right course forward, and as I said, across all levels of government, that's the message that we will taking to everyone.
Ben Wallace.
So I just want to mention something here. So notice again, he said he spoke to Netanyahu, right? Is he speaking to leaders of Iran? Is he speaking to people in Gaza? No, he's not. See, this is another thing. Like, we need to call for de-escalation, which I think we need to get rid of all these wars altogether. But he is leaving out the fact that Israel was the one who was the aggressor. They are the ones that provoked Iran. And from what I've been reading, seems like they've been provoking them for quite some time, right? So again, it's just like, you cannot sit here and say that it all started on October 7th and blame it on Hamas, but you're not willing to at the same time say it all started when Israel, bombed the Iranian embassy in Damascus. If you're willing to overlook that as well. Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is another country that is under almost constant daily bombardment by Iranian-made drones. That country is Ukraine. Some 3 years ago, I pleaded with the Israelis to help Ukraine against Russia, and they refused, even though Russia was spending $500 million in the Iranian drone program.
They refused because they are not interested in helping anyone but themselves. That's why they refuse. So get this, folks. Israel didn't even want to help Ukraine. But U.S. government just kicks out billions of dollars to Zelensky.
I know the Prime Minister is speaking to the Prime Minister of Israel later today. Now that RAF pilots have quite rightly gone to the defence of Israel, could he perhaps ask that Israel now decides that it is time to help Ukraine in their hour of need, and we can see off both Russia and Iranian aggression?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for the role he's played in ensuring UK security and that of our allies over previous years. He's right, as my statement alluded to as well. The Ukrainians are suffering from Iranian drones over the same weekend that this happened. And I'm also pleased, not only will I take up his points of always with all our allies, urging them to do more to support Ukraine. I know.
Pause. So I want to show you again the difference between the way they treat the Ukrainians and the Palestinians, because when it comes to Ukraine, he can say that the Ukrainians are suffering. When it comes to the Palestinians, like, yes, there's a humanitarian need in Gaza, but we all have to remember this all started with October 7th and want to ignore the entire history of everything that led up to October 7th. The amount of compassion and empathy that they show for the Ukrainian people versus the zero compassion that they show for the Palestinian people, it's very telling. And they expose to you again that one group of people is considered to be more valuable to them than the other group of people. John Kirby has done this as well.
He will have welcomed the recent announcement a few weeks ago of more support from the UK to Ukraine, specifically in the areas of uncrewed platforms on autonomous warfare, to make sure that the Ukrainians both have the ability they need to protect themselves and conduct their operations. And the majority of the 10,000 new platforms that we are delivering to the Ukrainians will have been developed in the UK, which I know is something that he was keen to ensure that we saw the benefits of here at home. I'm glad that has been realised, supporting Ukraine in their security and bolstering the British defence industry here at home.
Supporting the Ukrainians in their security, they all get on board for that, but they don't support the Palestinian people having any type of security or being able to defend their self. Remember, Gaza does not have a military. They do not support Gaza being able to defend their self. But they support Ukraine being able to do so. What a mess. We're going to fast forward to the part where George Galloway appears again. Hold on. I think it's right after. Oh, okay, yeah. So let me play this Rishi. I keep saying Richie. This Rishi part here.
Mr. Speaker, the issue of settler violence in the West Bank is something that I have personally repeatedly raised with Prime Minister Netanyahu, as indeed have my colleagues, including the Deputy Foreign Minister, and we have joined with allies in sanctioning activity of particular individuals where it has been brought to our attention, and we will continue to ensure that the Israeli government does everything it can to reduce tensions in the West Bank. We don't think it's conducive to long-term peace in the region.
Reduce tensions in the West Bank. How about eliminate tensions within the West Bank? And you do that by stopping Israeli settlers and the IDF from taking Palestinians' homes in the West Bank. You wouldn't have this tension in the West Bank if Israeli settlers were not kicking Palestinian people out of their homes or setting their homes on fire. What do you mean reduce the tension? What? He says it like it's a headache. You know, take an aspirin. You'll feel a little bit better. No, it's they need to get out of there. They have no business being there. The settlements are illegal. They're against international law. They shouldn't be there at all. There is no reduce the tensions. The Israeli settlers should not be there. They should not build any more settlements. And the settlements that they have taken over, and by the way, it doesn't even have to be them. American Israelis can go there and do that. The settlements that they have taken from the Palestinian people need to be returned. That's how you get rid of all the tension. Reduce the tensions.
And that's why I said we've taken action where we can, as well as being very explicit about our concerns with the Israeli government.
George Galloway.
Mr. Speaker, I knew your father well for a very long time. He was a fine man, and I am sincerely sorry for your loss. There was not one single word in the Prime Minister's statement of condemnation of the Israeli destruction of the Iranian consulate in Damascus.
And this is what we need in our Congress. Because you see, the other the representatives that we have in Congress, even the ones that call themselves progressive, they're not willing to do this. Rishi, he's the prime minister. He's the prime minister. Look at how George Galloway just spoke to the prime minister. We don't have one person that is willing to do what George Galloway is doing. Not one. Don't tell me AOC. Don't tell me Cori Bush. Not one. At the end of the day, they all cave.
Which is the proximate reason for the event everyone is here in concert condemning. He was not even asked to do so by the front bench opposite. Kay Burley is the only person so far to demand that of a government minister. We have no treaty with Israel, at least not one that Parliament has been shown. And the Iranians are not likely to listen to him. When Britain occupied Iran, looted its wealth, and overthrew its one democratic socialist government in my own lifetime.
Oh, there's an uproar there. There's an uproar there.
Well, Mr. Speaker, whatever may have happened a few weeks ago, it is absolutely no justification for launching more than 300 drones and missiles from one sovereign state towards Israel.
Pause. But there was that justification for Israel to demolish Gaza in response to October 7th. Because that's what Rishi Sunak was totally fine with that, with the way that Israel responded. Until there was pressure from the protesters, he was totally fine with that, with the way that Israel responded. The response was Israel has a right to defend itself. But apparently nobody else does. Someone should make a t-shirt that said Israel has a right to defend itself, but apparently nobody else does. Do you see how they reveal who they are? This wealthy prime minister does not have the interests of the American people, the working class people, the UK people. He doesn't have their best interests at hand. People will tell you he wasn't elected. He doesn't have their best interests at hand. He comes from money. He represents money. He protects corporate interests and the military industrial complex. And that is why he's in that seat. Nobody else has the right to defend themselves.
It's as simple as that. And in the honourable gentleman's question, not once did he condemn that action, or indeed the actions of Hamas in the region. There is no equivalence between these things whatsoever, and to suggest otherwise is simply wrong.
Robert Holford.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank my right honourable friend for his strong support for the state of Israel. Last year, as Israel and Saudi Arabia were about to strike a transformational agreement, Iran-backed Hamas carried out its massacre on October the 7th.
You see all this? All these people are bought. You see how all these people are bought and paid for, and now they bring up Hamas and all that stuff. It's a mess. Now, I want to fast forward to the discussion that George Galloway had with Scott Ritter about this. Iran gave one of the greatest military displays in recent history. Listen to this, because George Galloway, again, he hosts the mother of all talk shows. So he's a host, but he's also a politician. But notice the difference, like the same rhetoric that he has on his show, he has no problem saying those things to the prime minister's face. No problem saying that. When he was interviewed after he won, he had no problem saying that he despised the prime minister. You can't find one member of the squad that's willing to tell you that today. Not one of them. Even if they're pissed at Joe Biden, they're not willing to say, I'm very upset with Joe Biden. I despise Joe Biden. Not one of them are willing to do it because they're all simps. They're paid, they're corporate, and they all gave in to Democrat leadership so that they can further their careers. You got AOC out here giving money to the DCCC so that she can further her career. The money doesn't have to come from her. The money can come from anyone else. That's her looking out for herself. We don't have not one of them that has the guts to say what George Galloway said to the prime minister's face. Listen to what Scott Ritter says about Iran here.
Well, simply put, what happened is that the Iranian government has established a publicly discernible policy on deterrence. They have let Israel know, and not just Israel, they have let the United States and every other nation within missile range know that there will be a heavy price to be paid if you attack Iranian soil. That Iran will not tolerate the kind of attack that took place on the 1st of April, where Israel attacked the Iranian consulate in Damascus. And I believe Iran is also putting a marker on the table that says Iran will no longer tolerate the kind of actions such as the assassination of nuclear scientists on its soil by Israel in the past. This will not be tolerated. That in the future, if you choose to attack Iran, Iran will retaliate, and they will retaliate with the kind of force that cannot be interdicted and the kind of force that will destroy that which is seeking to destroy. Now, the Iranians were very clever in creating this posture, in that all they had to do was show a proof of concept. I think a lot of people were saying, well, they didn't destroy an airfield. They didn't destroy an Israeli headquarters. They didn't kill hundreds or thousands of Israelis. They weren't intending to. They were simply letting the Israelis and the Americans know that we have the capacity to destroy an airfield. All the Israelis have to do is look at a map, look where the Iranian missiles hit, and understand that the Iranians hit that which they were aiming at, and there was nothing Israel could do to stop those missiles from reaching their target. And Israel is the most heavily defended airspace in the world, with the most sophisticated anti-missile technology deployed in depth, and they couldn't stop the Iranian missiles. So the signal to the United States, which lacks this comprehensive air defense umbrella over its installations in the Middle East, is there too, but for the grace of God go you, if you choose to attack us or facilitate an Israeli attack. So this was, I call it one of the greatest military demonstrations in modern history, because by doing what they did, Iran not only put Israel into check, but believe it or not, they have created a foundation for peace and stability in the Middle East by eliminating from consideration options that Israel and the United States may have been considering down the road, such as a preemptive strike against Iranian nuclear facilities or a punishing attack against the Iranian regime. The United States and Israel now on notice that if they attempt to do something like that, the price they will pay will be prohibitively high. In the case of Israel, it might be terminally high.
So notice he said there to send a message, right? Have you ever had someone try to send you a message, right? It's like they didn't destroy you, but they kind of put out the little, a little bug out there for you to check yourself. To check yourself, right? I've seen this happen before with relationships. You may have seen this happen. Maybe you were part of one of those relationships and you were one of the people that it happened to, right? But I've seen women do this with their husbands. When I was in college, when I was waiting tables at the Olive Garden, I remember some of the women that would come in with their husbands, like some of them were just like totally chill, but some of them were mean. And they would honestly like check their husbands in front of other people. And I remember one time I was waiting on this one table and it was a couple. And for whatever reason, this woman, I don't know what the deal was, but she didn't, I guess, allow her husband to talk to other women. And I don't mean talk to other women as if like trying to date them or ask them out. I mean, seriously, just speak to other women, period. So like if you went to their table and said, and what would you like to get to order? He will have a sweet tea. I'm like, whoa, what is happening here? And so I had this couple multiple times, more than one time, right? And so they were regulars. And every time, like she would not let this guy speak. It was the weirdest thing. So anyway, one time I remember I came to the table. I think she was in the restroom. And so I asked, oh, will you be having like your usual 2 sweet teas? And he looked up and said, well, yeah, she came in, was right behind me. And she sat down and she said, he'll have a sweet tea and I'll have an unsweet tea. And I said, okay, great. Thanks. So I start to walk back towards the kitchen and I overhear her say to him, don't let me embarrass you in front of all these people. Whoa. So it was one of those moments. So that was an example of her trying to check him. So she didn't flat out embarrass him in front of everyone, but she let him know that if he, I guess, spoke to a woman again, she was going to embarrass him in front of all those people. Now that was ridiculous. There are some women that are like that. I got a lot of stories to tell you from when I used to wait tables. We can talk about this all night. We can talk about it all night. Okay. I'm telling you. But yeah, sending a message. Now I want to go to the second part of that interview there as well. And I want to go ahead and pick up right about here.
But do you agree with me that, as George W. Bush might put it, they've all misunderestimated Iran all along?
Well, again, the military hasn't. I have to say that I've worked with Israeli intelligence, with their technical intelligence people, with the people who do the analysis and the assessments of missiles. These are smart people. And if I, sitting here thousands of miles away without any access to secret information, could have said, I knew most of this going in before this happened. I knew what Iranian capabilities were. I can guarantee you they knew exactly what this was. But the problem is getting their voice heard by Israeli policymakers who are driven by emotion and by politics, domestic politics, etc. What this attack did is empower their voices, because now, whereas political leaders could say, well, you're just speculating, you don't know, that's just geeky intelligence stuff. Now they have the hard data. The photograph put on the table, the air defense guys saying, boss, we gave it our best shot. There was nothing we could do to stop them. The Americans calling up saying, there's nothing more we can do. We did everything. We can't stop this. And now the Israeli politicians are waking up to the harsh reality that the fiction that they have been living under is not even close to reality. It was a fantasy, and there's a real world out there, and it's a dangerous world, and they're going to have to change the way that they operate.
And Scott Ritter would know, right? Because, he was an intelligence officer. He's been in that region. He's been on the show before. He's very knowledgeable about what happens in that region. And I think, Iran basically sent a wake-up call to Israel. I think Israel would be completely foolish to respond to Iran. But, they've done other foolish things, so you never know. But I would sincerely hope that they would not respond to that. Just let it go. It's interesting. Even Greenwald had to say, Biden had to say, let it go. even Biden had to say, just let it go or whatever. But I think that when you see someone like George Galloway, and I don't know how much longer he will be on the show. I have to look that up. Someone told me, will he still be able to do the show now that he's in political position? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how the rules are in the UK, so I have to look that up. But I will say that it just goes to show you, that's what we wanted from the squad. That's what we expected from them, that same type of energy and that same type of fire. And Rishi Sunak knew that was how George Galloway was going to be. And that's why he released a statement after George Galloway won, I guess, to try to turn the public against him. But obviously that did not work. The people have spoken. People voted for him for a reason, right? Let's go to some of the comments here. If you haven't had a chance to do so, smash that like button. Don't forget to like, sub, and share with your friends and your fam. Some of these comments I'm already laughing about. I'm already laughing at some of these comments. Marvin says, Sabby, do you order food for your hubby when you go out? LOL. Oh, God, no. I never understood that. Like the women who would do that, I didn't understand. Like, why would you? Are you his mom? Like, Leroy says, I wonder if Sabby would be able to interview George or get on his show. I've been on his show before. I can try to do interview. I know he's really busy, but I can try to reach out. Thank you for the super sticker, Debs. And thank you for the super sticker, J Legend. J Legend sounds like the name of a musician. J Legend back in action. Album 3. Monique says Gigi is trying to get Richard Medhurst to run for parliament with the Workers' Party. Holy smokes. That would be awesome, man. I'll have to look into that. Lance says we want more stories. Oh my God. Oh man. That'll have to be a call-in segment or something. Marcel says need a whole episode of Sabby restaurant stories. I have some stories. I could write a vlog about it. Arcane said women be like that if you let them. Why? It was always weird to me. Like when I would see that happen, I'm like, are you afraid of this woman? Like, Troy said she put a hex on that man. I put a spell on you because you're mine. Thank you for the super chat, Damaris. Your most recent convo with Matt Taibbi has been replaying on my mind. Great. And push back. Oh, thank you, Damaris. Thank you for the super chat, Troy. Thank you for always spilling the tea with us, Sabby. Good work. Also, that woman sounds like she put him under a hex. Hashtag psycho. You guys remember that song? I put a spell on you. I put a spell on you. Is that his name? Love Screaming Jay Hawkins. Okay, is that who sings that song? I don't know who actually sings the song, but that song is pretty based. Put a spell on you. Let's take the comment on Rockfin, Eric. You guys got me cracking up, man. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Lisa. Palestinians or anyone who is a person of color in their eyes are not human. Like Theodore Herzl said, a land without a people for a people without a land. I condemn Israel. Thank you so much for that, Lisa. Well said there. Well said. Someone said clear CCC. Oh, Bad Cookie said yes. Credence did a cover of it. Oh, I didn't realize that. All right. Let's get to our next story here. So Glenn Greenwald actually had a discussion with Megyn Kelly about Israel and Gaza. And I sincerely hope Megyn has learned something from this discussion. Megyn has said some pretty cringe things like recently. And I'm just like, what is your deal, girl? What is your deal? But they're friendly with each other. So they decided to have, I don't even want to call it a debate. I do want to call it a discussion, which is kind of how Glenn Greenwald referred to it here. He said, I was on my friend Megyn Kelly's show today where we explored our differences on U.S. support for Israel, Iran, the causes of anti-American hatred, and U.S. foreign policy generally. We had a spirited and contentious, but civil and constructive debate. Always good when that happens. Let's see, folks. Let's dive in to Glenn Greenwald versus Megyn Kelly.
The main point I want to make here, Megyn, is this, which is I think Noah radically minimized the extent to which the United States is involved in Israel's wars and the extent to which the United States supports Israel. We give Israel $4 billion every year. Much of that, but not all, is used to buy arms from American arms dealers, but it's still a transfer of wealth to Israel. $4 billion, by far more than any other country gets over decades, even though millions of Israelis have a higher standard of living than millions of Americans. On top of that, we don't just provide them with arms, we also pay for their wars.
Pause. Glenn, think about what Glenn just said. Most Israeli Americans have a higher standard of living than Americans. Just think about that. Now, we have people in this country that are poor, people that are working class. We have people in this country still trying to make a living off of minimum wage. They're just paid the federal minimum wage. And they're still trying to make like ends meet with that. People that have to have multiple jobs. We have people in this country that don't have health care. We have people in this country that, again, can't afford to go to college. They can't take out student loans because of other reasons, right? But in Israel, everyone has free college and free healthcare.
We often involve ourselves in their conflict. You pointed out that yesterday or the day before, we did send fighter jets to take down missiles. It was defensive, but we are involved in that way, and also by bombing Yemen. And we isolate ourselves diplomatically to protect Israel. All the time there are UN resolutions supported by almost every country in the world, and we use our veto power to protect Israel. And many leading military officials like David Petraeus have said that a major reason why we're so at risk in the Middle East, why our service members are, why our assets are, is because that region perceives that we are always tied to the hip with Israel. And I think it is a legitimate question to ask. It goes far beyond a normal alliance. Why it is that we pay for Israel's wars, we arm Israel's wars, we give them $4 billion a year, we sacrifice our soft power and standing in the world to protect them. And if we're going to do that, and I think it's really worth asking why can't Israel pay for its own wars? Then of course we also have the right to say, look, we're paying for your wars, we're giving you the weapons. There are things that we don't want you to do that harm our interests, like doing a major retaliatory attack against Iran that could very well drag us back into another Middle East war that Americans overwhelmingly don't want to be involved with. And I think that's the key to the U.S.-Israeli relationship, is that we are tied to them in ways that we are not tied to any other country in the world. We arm them, we pay for their wars, we do everything to protect them. It's a very unique and peculiar relationship.
100%. And it's annoying and it's aggravating because we don't even do all that for people in our country. And people need to ask. Again, I told you the Israeli lobby is a big, like, think about it, folks. What if it wasn't the Israeli lobby? What if it was China? What if there's like a Chinese lobby that had bought all of our politicians, or a Russian lobby that bought all of our politicians? People would be up in arms about this, right? People would be livid. Could you imagine? Could you imagine China saying, okay, we want to buy some of the American politicians too? No, people would they would lose their shit. They really would. But it's okay for Israel. Israel can do whatever they want to do. And that's a dangerous, that's a dangerous, precedent. That's a dangerous ideology. Like the fact that they can get away with whatever they want to do. That is very dangerous.
What about the fact that, if we leave Israel to its own devices, we're worried that something like, an Iranian attack will happen. We certainly don't want to see Iran emboldened. One country's chanting death to America since 1979, as Noah points out. One country isn't. One country's an ally that is aligned with us on its views of democracy and what peace looks like in the world. Like, why wouldn't we do everything we can to shore up Israel, which, as Netanyahu and others have said, lives in a very tough neighborhood?
What is she talking about? What very much aligned? How are they aligned with us? Give me some examples. And I'm getting tired of people saying this is the only democracy in the Middle East. Listen, you can't interfaith marriage is illegal in Israel. How are they aligned with us? Okay, so same-sex marriage is illegal in Israel. How are they aligned with us? What? We have separation of church and state in the United States. How are they aligned with us? Just because they're a democracy, that's it? We need to start asking that question. How are they apparently aligned with us? And we need to start questioning their so-called democracy, which we question the democracy here in the United States. I tell you, it's not a true democracy. What a mess.
Israel is a nuclear power. They have an arsenal of nuclear weapons. They have one of the most sophisticated militaries in the world. They have a thriving economy. They have the Middle East, Silicon Valley. Why can't Israel take care of itself? Why can't Israel pay for its own wars? I think that's a big question. And when we tie ourselves to Israel, it does harm American interests in all sorts of ways. The potential to be dragged into another Middle East war is obviously significant, but also the anger and hatred toward Israel gets directed at the United States as well.
All right, but let me ask you about that one. I get that, and I see that point, but I also feel
we don't do this for any other country, though, Megyn. Don't you think that's a little bit odd? Like, are we giving France $4 billion a year? Like, are we what, huh? Like and I think Megyn is playing coy here. I think Megyn is very much aware of the Israeli lobby and that these politicians are bought off. I think Megyn knows exactly why we have this relationship that we have with the state of Israel. But I think she's playing to her base. Again, I feel like she's playing to her audience. And I don't know what happened. Megyn looks very different. When I was watching this interview, I'm like, Megyn looks very different to me. I don't know. I hope she is okay. But she does not look okay.
Like, Glenn, they hate us. They hate, like the Iranian, not the Iranian people, but like the leaders over in Iran. They're going to hate us less if we don't back Israel. I don't buy it. Hell no. They hate us because of our principles, because of our constitution, because of the way we live, because women walk around in tank tops. We could go down the list, but it's not going to go away if we stop supporting Israel.
Israel doesn't like us either, Megyn. They're just using us for money and defense. Are you kidding me? They don't like us either. They are using the U.S. government. I mean, yes, of course, they're going to be nice and smile in Biden's face and whoever the president is at that point in time because they're getting money from us. What do you expect to happen? If the money stopped, the smiles would stop, okay? If the money stopped and we dried up the money that we were sending to Israel, they would announce that they hate us too, publicly, Megyn. But when someone's just giving you a steady flow of cash every year, are you going to publicly announce, I hate them? No.
Megyn, this was the debate about 9/11. Like, why did they hate us? Why did they attack us? And the neocon narrative was, oh, they hate us for our freedoms. And bin Laden repeatedly said, there was that letter that recirculated that was banned from TikTok. We are angry at America because they are constantly insinuating themselves into our region. They imposed a sanctions regime on Iraq that killed hundreds of thousands of Iraqi children. They put troops on Saudi soil. The reason Iran hates us, and I'm not justifying it at all, but I think it's very important to have an open eyes about your own country, is that in 1954, we overthrew their democratically elected government, the CIA did, and we imposed on them for the next 25 years one of the most savage and brutal dictatorships in the world, the Shah of Iran. And so when Iran had its revolution and finally deposed their dictator, the Shah of Iran, of course they knew the United States was responsible for his imposition on them for all those decades. And so they had a lot of animosity toward the United States. There are all kinds of countries in the world, Korea and Japan and Brazil and Norway, that have all
then
the
they
same
took all our
freedoms as we
hostages.
do.
Yeah, but Glenn, I mean, you're looking at a country, Israel. Israel has a sense of due process and fairness, and Iran.
What sense of due process and fairness when they've actually arrested Palestinians and thrown them into prison without a fair trial? What sense of due process when they're looking for one Palestinian person in Gaza and they've actually, or in the West Bank, they're looking for one person and they go to that home and that person isn't there. So they take another family member in their place instead. How is that due process? You cannot be this naive, Megyn. You cannot be this naive. You cannot be this coy, considering the fact as long as you've been in media yourself, there's no way you believe what you're saying. There's no way.
Is hanging people from cranes. Iran is stoning women to death for not wearing the damn hijab. How the hell are we going to have a relationship with them? It's a no.
Okay. So we'll come back to that in just a second. So she brings up the stoning incident, right? Where was that same passion and fire from Megyn Kelly when we have police officers beating unarmed people here in the streets in the United States? Where was that same passion, that same fire from Megyn? Didn't hear it, did you? Okay. Pay attention to those things.
Megyn, we have relationships with the most savage dictators on the planet, our close allies
But in this instance,
Saudi
we do
Arabia
need
and
to
our close
choose.
allies in Egypt. Okay, but you have Saudi Arabia, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, all of which are American allies that are among the most brutal and savage dictatorships in the world. We're fine with having relationships, good relationships and alliances with countries that are extremely repressive, as long as they do the bidding of the United States.
One of the reasons is their hatred of Iran and vice versa. I mean, those two groups are Shiite versus Sunni, and there's a long-standing hatred between them. One of them wants to completely annihilate Israel, and one of them was actually open-minded to doing a deal with Israel and getting to a better place when we were backing Israel under Trump, when we were helping making it stronger. And these other allies, Saudi Arabia and the others, were starting to look at it like, you know what, maybe we are going to have to deal with this country. We were moving toward peace.
No, I'm sorry. Eric said Glenn will not be asked back on. I'm sorry, Megyn. This is not your wheelhouse, honey. This is not your wheelhouse. I'm sorry, but Glenn is well versed in this, you know, and I think you should have on someone like Max Blumenthal. I think you should have on Norm Finkelstein as well. I don't know if she had on Norm. You should have on them on as well. This is not your wheelhouse.
It's true. The dictators of Egypt and Saudi Arabia and the Gulf state regions understand that there can be economic benefits from a relationship with Israel. They don't represent the people of those countries. These are dictators imposed by military coups that the United States props up. And all I'm saying is we're very tribal as human beings. We always like to see things through the perspective of our side, to believe that we're the morally superior ones, we're the victims, they're the aggressors, they're evil. I understand the appeal of that narrative. But you were just talking about the multiple wars that we fought in the Middle East. We invaded Iraq and destroyed it. That strengthened Iran by strengthening the Shiite militias. Saddam Hussein was a vehement opponent of Iran. We created the vacuum out of which ISIS emerged. Even Tony Blair says that. We were in Afghanistan for 20 years. We've been bombing that region for a long time. I think on some level, we have to take some responsibility for why there's anti-American resentment in that region and ask whether that's worth it.
I agree with that. I don't disagree with you at all on that. And I'm very open-minded to, you know, the growing strain of isolationism, for lack of a better term, in the Republican Party. And, you know, you're not a Republican, but I mean, this country was sort of born into isolationism. That's how we were through the lead up to World War I. We didn't want anything to do with any of this. And we get sucked into these conflicts, and those two, you know, as the t-shirt reads, back-to-back World War champions. And things have gone south for us ever since. Every war we get involved in.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I get it. And so I'm not this bellicose pro-war neocon at all. I just...
No. Okay. So I just want to say this. I think Megyn is being a little too kind about the U.S. government. What Glenn is trying to explain to Megyn is that the reason why some of these countries have this type of animosity towards the United States is because of what we have done in those countries. And usually we were the ones who started it. We were the ones who overthrew leaders in those countries. We were the ones that stole resources in those countries. We were the ones that implemented coups in those countries. Everybody's keeps complaining about people coming from Venezuela. But again, who was the one that implemented a coup in Venezuela? That was the United States government. You can say the same thing in reference to Haiti. We're the ones that have destroyed these countries. Us, and a lot of times the UK was involved in some way, shape, or form as well. So you cannot expect these people, after dealing with this type of, I guess, just domination by the United States government, you can't expect those people to open their arms and want to hug us. You can't expect those people to say they love America. What do you expect those people to feel? Imagine if it was the other way around and it was happening to us. Imagine if it was Afghanistan that came to the United States and they took all our resources and killed a lot of our people and left us with nothing but destruction. How would you feel? Would you expect us to say, we love Afghanistan? No, you would not. And you would probably not feel that way either, Megyn. You would probably have some type of resentment towards Afghanistan. So we have to learn how to put ourselves in other people's shoes. We have to learn how to ask ourselves, get out of our bubble that we have in the United States, get out of this Western imperialist bubble, and imagine what it must be like for people in those countries that the U.S. government has destroyed.
I see the value in aligning with Israel. I see how evil the Iranian regime is, and I have absolutely no tolerance for the fucking bin Laden letter. Zero.
No, I'm not saying the bin Laden letter is good. I'm just saying it expresses the reasons why so many people in that region harbor anti-American sentiment. It's not because they love our freedom.
Bin Laden at his word. He hated.
No, but you go
us.
to anywhere. You go to anywhere in that region, and you ask people why they have There are all kinds of free countries around the world that people in that region don't hate. You know, I said they don't hate South Korea. They don't hate.
They're not the leader
Japan.
of the
they
free
don't hate
world.
Holland.
Oh, please.
Right.
They're not the leader of the free world. So think about what she just said there, right? So she doesn't want to believe the bin Laden letter, doesn't believe him. Okay, but you believe politicians? You believe the U.S. government, Megyn? Apparently you do, because the talking points that you're using are obviously parroted from the State Department. You believe the State Department, you believe the U.S. government, you believe these politicians. No one can be this naive.
You can't compare any of those to America, but okay, keep going.
No, but you're saying that the reason they hate us is because we're free. And I'm saying that a big part of the reason they hate us is because we've been bombing that region for decades. We've been interfering in their government, overthrowing their democratically elected leaders, imposing dictatorships on them.
If we stop tomorrow, they will still bomb us. They will still try to get into the New World Trade Center. They will try to get to Wall Street. They will send ISIS. They will continue coming for us. It's over. There's no mending the fences with the radical Islamists.
You mean the way that we came for them? So you think the U.S. government should just be able to do whatever they want to these countries? Attack these people, kill these people, steal their resources, overthrow their leaders? You think the U.S. government should just be able to do whatever they want and have no type of accountability? And this is where it comes from. We're not held accountable. I keep telling you about how Israel isn't held accountable. But the reality is, folks, we're not held accountable either. Because for the most part, the other countries that are a part of the West, they kind of go along with what the U.S. government says and does. It's just the reality of the situation.
Who chant death to America, even if we don't support Israel.
There are, of course, radical groups in the Middle East that are just psychopaths like ISIS. But to assume that they're all just these primitive people on the warpath of violence without any rational cause or any rational reason, I think is a mistake. And the two things I just want to say is the two documents I just want to cite that I think are crucial to understand this context. One is the farewell address of George Washington when he said the whole point of our republic is that we're not going to have any enduring alliances with any country or any enduring amity to any country as well. We're going to avoid international conflict that way. And then Dwight Eisenhower, when he oversaw the war machine in the military-industrial complex in the U.S. security state throughout the 1950s, when he left in 1961, he had 9 minutes on national TV to give his farewell address. And what he chose to use it for was to warn us about the grave dangers of the influence of the military-industrial complex, this permanent faction in Washington that exerts its own interests higher and more powerful than even our elected representatives. And what they always want is war, because that's how they profit and get power.
And that's a really good point that Glenn just brought up there. And I also want to chime in and say the founding fathers, as much as people bring them up sometimes, our founding fathers did not want political parties. And they didn't want political parties for the same reason, for the same issues that you see us having today. Right? They didn't want it because they knew what would happen is that people would basically just go along with their party instead of their principles and their morals and what they really wanted.
I think we have to be very much more alert to that danger than we have been.
There are some common sense reasons gold is pushing to all-time highs.
No, you got to go, Megyn. I sincerely hope that Megyn learned something from that conversation. That was kind of weird. Some of the things that she said there, I just could not believe myself. I'm like, you have to know better, Megyn. You've been in media long enough. You have to know better. But I do want to address something that was mentioned about the hijab. So women across Iran are refusing to wear headscarves in open defiance of the regime. I do want to mention this piece that she mentioned there. So you'll see here's women here not, wearing one. And it just says here, Tehran, Iran. You see it as soon as you land in the airport, posters telling women to keep their headscarves on. They're everywhere in Iran, in malls, restaurants, billboards, above main highways, and even rest stops in between the cities. The hijab remains the official law in Iran. So it remains the official law, but these days, all around the country, many women are going about their business hair uncovered. It is a vivid reminder of the public uproar of anti-government protests that erupted after Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old Kurdish woman, was killed in police custody in September. She was allegedly arrested for improper wear of her head scarf. So I did just want to point that out there, that it is still the law, but more women are choosing not to do it. So I did want to mention that part there. I thought that was important for people to know. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Thank you for the super sticker. Where's the love? Thank you for the super chat, Marvin. Love your show. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much. Thank you. Sparky says, hey, Sabby love. Hello. Olga says Megyn Kelly's chin can drill into the pavement. Into the pavement? What do you mean, Olga? What's happening? Olga? Okay. Thank you for the super chat, Sparky. Every time anyone says that Israel is our only friend in the Middle East, I can't help but think that before Israel, we had no enemies in the Middle East. U.S. missionary John Sheehan. Thank you for this as well, Sparky. Iran was once a choice duty station for American military families. Interesting. Thank you for this, Troy. Some Israelis refer to themselves as the superior race and think they can do whatever they want. Similar to some Americans, we are equal people. Thank you, Sparky. Megyn using stale, long debunked propaganda. And thank you for this as well. ISIS has been an American asset for a while now. Yeah, it was really weird. I'm just like, you have to know about that at this point in time, right? Like, come on. Okay, guys, that is it for me tonight. Quick announcement so I don't forget. Thursday's show is most likely going to happen in the afternoon, probably around 2 p.m. Eastern time. I'll send out an update or an alert from my newsletter, probably the night before, just to give you a heads up, or early Thursday morning. We're going to card confirm tomorrow, but it looks like Max Blumenthal will be here Thursday. So to accommodate Max time, I'll probably be live Thursday afternoon instead of Thursday evening. Just FYI. So just letting you know about that. If you want to continue to support what I do, you can just follow me on my website, which is sabbysabs.com. How convenient. I hope you guys remember that. I think it's easy to remember. sabbysabs.com. You can follow me on my website here. And this is where you can see a little bit about me, but you can also follow all of my resources here. You can find my merchandise store, my Substack, and my Patreon. So this is where I've been directing a lot of people to, instead of just directing them to my Substack. If you go to my website, everything is all in one place. So that is probably the best place to follow me. And you'll also see that videos do repopulate here on the website as well. That is it for me, fam. We'll probably do call in Thursday after the afternoon show on Thursday. We'll probably do it then because I actually I have early start tomorrow morning, so we won't be able to do it tonight. Thank you, Sparky. Remember, Islamic extremism in the Middle East was started decades ago by the CIA and MI6 to keep those countries and their people down. Now Megyn complains about it. Very good point there. Someone said this show seems quick today somehow. Yeah, because I'm actually doing I'm actually stopping at a little over 2 hours. The show is only supposed to be 2 hours, but somehow I end up talking for a long time. Yeah, I know my Wi-Fi is a little fuzzy. I have to reset it. But anyway, I'm heading out anyway. All right, guys, have a good night. Keep up the fight.